thank you so much for being here and taking this forward. I think, Kizar, we are good to go live. I'm going to start now.
We are live on Facebook as well.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. We are live on Facebook also, guys. So, I hope you're all looking nice and cool. So again, thank you so much for being here, guys. And this is a webinar where we want to talk about how media can help us curb the pandemic, shadow pandemic that it has been declared as by the WHO, which is domestic violence. What are the tools and the strategies that media has that can help us curb domestic violence while it is on the surface? I would request the panelists to start with their introductions. We'll just take a minute or so for the introductions. Then I'll introduce my team, and then I can just post the questions that I have. Can I request Tara to go first?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tara Kaushal. I'm a writer and media consultant based in Mumbai and the Gold Coast. My first book, called Why Men Rape, an Indian undercover investigation, is being published by HarperCollins on the 22nd of June, which is why I'm here. Yeah, that's all I have to say about myself.
We have Shambhavis from Youth Ki Awaaz. Shambhavi, if you could just say 2 words about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Shambhavi and I work as a writer and editor at Youth Ki Awaaz, which is India's largest self-publishing platform for young people to talk about important issues that matter to them. I am a queer feminist and I try and bring that into all the work that I do, particularly whatever issues we're covering around domestic violence, and I'm very excited to start this conversation today.
Thank you so much, Shambhavi. We have Palak Mehra. She's a creative producer at Butterfly. And go ahead, Palak.
Hi guys, I am Palak Mehra. As Punita said, I am the creative producer at Butterfly. We make a lot of content on women. We bring out the women's voice. So be it domestic violence or any other acid attack survivor, we have done our bit to bring voice of those women on Butterfly platform. So we do our bit.
Thanks, Palak. We also have Mansi, Shah from Butterfly itself, and they had hosted, just like Youth Ki Awaaz, they had also hosted one of the solidarity graphics that we had to raise awareness on domestic violence. So thank you for that, guys. First of all, shout out to you. Mansi, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Hi guys, I am Mansi Shah. I am the managing editor at Butterfly. I basically handle all the website written articles, and it's actually been quite eye-opening for me to see. I mean, this bit has been quite eye-opening in that sense that I did not expect that the shadow pandemic would become a bigger concern than the pandemic itself. And yeah, that's been like quite a shocker in just the most unpleasant way. And I have so much to say, but I'm just going to say this in the introduction. So yeah, hi, I can't wait to get started.
Awesome. Sonam, hi. So excited to meet you. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Hi, so excited to be here. I am Sonam Mittal. I am an activist. I write. I work on sexual harassment in the workplace through Azadi. And in my spare time, I deal with a lot of online trolls. On my page, The Spoiled Modern Indian Women. A lot of fun, interesting conversations that happen online. And I'm so happy to be back. I used to work with Jhatka long back in 2015, I guess. So it's really, really good to be back and associated with Jhatka.
Great to know. Thank you. I won't take too much time introducing the team and myself. I'm Punita Maheshwari. I'm the Gender and Sexuality Campaigner with Jhatka.org. We have Suman here. She manages the Gender and Sexuality team. She's my boss. And okay, I could see the, yeah. Anyway, We have Jacob here. He's the engagement director with Chatka.org, and thanks to him, we get to network a lot better than we used to. So thanks, Jacob, for that. We have Kizar. He's a growth manager. He's managing the Facebook Live right now, and yeah, I think it's time to start the discussion. The first question that I have, I think I would like to take the liberty and ask this to two media houses here, Hotifly and Youth Ki Awaaz. What are the tools and the power that media holds that you see to curb domestic violence? This can be videos, this can be campaigning strategies, this can be, connections in the ministries and local connections, anything. What is the best thing in your perspective that helps, uh, you know, media to curb domestic violence? Shambhavis, Palak, Mansi, if you could take that, any one of you.
Is it okay if I start?
Sure.
Okay. So it's, answering this question is interesting because my mind immediately goes to platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. But what I really want to stress on is that Youth Ki Awaaz is also a platform specifically created to talk about issues like this. It's a tool for young people to be frank and open about issues. One of the core issues being domestic violence. Gender and sexuality is a huge part of what our organization does. And, particularly now it's relevant because of the shadow pandemic, as you mentioned. A lot of people are coming out with stories. A lot of users are writing and publishing both personal articles as well as, more analytical pieces. So it's, right now Youth Ki Awaaz is being that space to collectively find solutions, not just sort of report and reflect on a problem, but, really talking about where do we go next. So what's interesting is that people are also using this as a tool to start building their own campaigns. And they're sharing resources, they're using allied platforms as well, like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, to bring the conversation of domestic violence and how to end it to other youth, but also bringing it to policymakers online, particularly on Twitter. So where tools are concerned, we're using everything at our disposal, but particularly our existence as well.
All right. Thank you, Shambhavi. And that is actually one of my questions about how media and campaigning can go hand in hand in the future and how they have been going and how we can get better at that. But we'll come to that a little later. Before that, I have a question for you, Palak or Mansi, whoever wants to step in about how Shambhavi mentioned about using the content to reach the decision makers. Is this something that you also have consciously on your platform?
I'm just I'll just take that. So one of the first things I want to say is that this is so big that you kind of need to be relentless. Like there is no you can't talk about this today and then be quiet about it tomorrow and then talk about it day after. It's literally every day talking about this. It almost like you get a lot of comments saying you're very negative in the content you create, and you're very pessimistic, and you get a lot of criticism for it as well. It's so relentless. You have to be at it. You have to highlight every problem everywhere in the country, and we try and do it like across the world. So if there is, if there is a problem about domestic violence around the world, then we're talking about it. And one of the biggest learning has been that you, as a platform, we need to be talking about it despite us getting trolled for it. Like being like, okay, you guys only talk about this, or you're starting to become extremely negative. You're making us feel like this is a bad thing. It's almost like you have to pull off blinders of people, and it's relentless.
I'm sure. It's just that right now we found that it was a very great time to talk about it because I don't remember the last time when domestic violence was highlighted so much in the media, given its magnitude. Um, but definitely, we have to be relentless about it, and that's the purpose of this webinar as well, to find out the ways how we can be relentless. And whatever we gather from the discussions today with the experts that we have on board, we will take this consultation to the decision makers, and we will be in touch with you even after the webinar, talking about the best practices to tackle domestic violence. That definitely brings me to the next question, and I think I have this for Tara. Given about your book and the experience that you have in this field, you have a lot of experience and information about how a family structure or how a societal structure works that reflects in the rape culture or a violence culture that we have towards our women. I would just like to have your comment on that, how it starts at home, while it is a societal issue, but how it starts with just one statement or one taunt or anything of that sort, and how consciously we can as family look to call that out, or among others, or even ourselves.
So part of me feels that we address violence and rape culture all wrong. Okay, we talk about rape culture to women on women's platforms. And I know that's why we have so many women-centric NGOs that talk about, for rape victims or victims of domestic violence and all of that. But to me, the problem originates with the people perpetrating the gender violence, right? Whether it's rape or domestic violence. So while we need a support culture for the women, and I really appreciate this, and there's no, I'm all for it. I think the solution lies and the onus lies with the people perpetrating the violence. Now, what one doesn't realize is, and this is something that I realized when I spoke to a lot of the experts, and one of them, one of the world's biggest experts on gender violence. I remember I'd start my questionnaire with, why do you think men rape? And the first answer Dr. Gary Barker gave me was, watching your father hit your mother is one of the first things that sets a man off on the path of rape. There are other factors, but he listed this as the first one. And I see this as important because that's one aspect of it. But when you see, and when kids are beaten at home and they see their mothers beaten at home, it normalizes violence. Okay, it makes violence okay. It makes violence what people in power do to people who are less powerful. It makes violence the thing that men do to women. So to me, domestic violence in the home is a really, really big issue that has far-reaching consequences, not only when you come to rape, but it has consequences in terms of self-esteem for both genders. And the minute you see rape, and one of the reasons that men perpetrate gender violence is power. It's not the only reason, which is what the narrative has become. But one of the reasons is power. And if that's the reason they're perpetrating gender violence, then certainly having seen that at home and having feeling disempowered, or seeing domestic violence as what the powerful do to the less powerful, it normalizes violence, and that's got to stop. So yeah, gender violence, domestic violence has far-reaching consequences on men, on women, on the gender paradigm throughout the world and throughout the lifetime of the person who's either experiencing or seeing gender violence at home.
Yeah, so it starts at home. Yes, go ahead, Palak.
Yeah, so about what Tara said, that's where media comes into play. So for example, if a student in a school is doing something wrong and it's not being highlighted, he is not being caught, he would never know that he was guilty. So that's where media comes into play. So we bring out that voice where the guilty is made conscious, and we bring out the victim's voice. So we are, trying to do both the things. We are bringing out the victim's voice, and we are making the person guilty, so that at least, his conscious realizes and he repents about it. So that's where we come into play, and we make content on such women.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And like Mansi already mentioned, that it has to be relentless. And it also brings me to another question about the desensitization part of it. Like, the more the information is spread, we are going to talk about it. But before that, I have a question for Sonam about how this is regarding the comedy and the totally in a way, especially in our TV and audios and the films that we see, domestic violence is seen as something without a warning. Like, it's something that it's a very natural process that everyone has to go through it. So do you think that it should be on media, like not just the media, like I'm talking about the film media here, to have a very conscious content out, so that people do not get, because a lot of people get influenced by the movies and the TV serials that we watch. It's a very subconscious thing. So do you think that the film media should be asked to sensitize about it?
Yes, definitely. It's a continuous cycle. You see something happening in films and movies, and that becomes a part of the normal culture. And since it's a part of the normal culture, it gets continued being shown on films and TVs and movies. We have Telugu cinema where the hero will slap the heroine because she was being too modern and too spoiled and too fast, and then she suddenly has a change of heart, and then she becomes a completely sanskari lady, and then they fall in love and they get married and everything. And you have there was a famous case in Australia where a man was Indian man was he was in the court, and then he got out because the lawyer argued that it was not his fault that he was stalking that Australian woman. He learned it from the movie, so it's a very accepted part of the culture. And of course, we have the cherry on top of the cake, Kabir Singh, the movie. It's freedom of speech to show or to glamorize such movies. And I had a long discussion that went on for weeks and weeks on the page called Modern Indian Women on this movie, because people were split. They were like freedom of speech. The director should have the freedom to do whatever they want. A lot of people were like, this is not funny. This is what we go through every day. How can you make fun of this? And on other hand, we had women who were fantasizing about having a hero like Kabir Singh in their lives. And then, of course, the director came and said that the wonderful comments, the pearls of wisdom that he gave us, that if two people are in love, it's okay to hit each other, because that's such a cute expression of love. Media accountability is very difficult because it's a thin line between freedom of speech and what you want to show, because your mindset is misogynistic or internalized misogyny or patriarchal. I don't think so. We have reached that point yet as a collective to have a discussion and reach a conclusion on that. We have different factions. We are split. We don't have that much of voices yet.
I agree with you, Sonam. We do not have enough voices to say that, and that exactly what brings me to the next question. That how can
sorry, can I just butt in? She makes such a valid point. I feel like when they put up their hands and say, we're not responsible for what people take away from this, you're pretending that your sense of social responsibility does not exist, which is shocking to me. We've done articles in which people have been inspired by Kabir Singh and have murdered their wives, hit their wives, because you're not talking to a person in one particular area with your sort of social conditioning. You're speaking to that's the power of cinema, right? Like you're speaking to everyone, and this person doesn't see it as a violent love from a manipulative, disturbed mind. That's not how they see it. And this is just one movie. Movies inspire everybody, and they seem to just sort of say, hey, it's fine, you should just take it with a pinch of salt. Well, no, just have a look at what you're perpetrating on ground level. Sorry, I just got very riled up.
You're right. The last National Family Health Survey, which was years back, so the only silver lining can be that the statistics have changed for the better since then. But that survey showed that 1 out of every 3 women, married women, they experience domestic violence. 1 out of every 3. That's not a small number. I forgot the percentage, but there was also a significant subset of these women who believed it was okay for their husbands to hit them because they must have done something wrong. So what is it? Is it that we are making the films because we are like this, or are we like this because the films are being made like this? It's a cycle that we don't know what to do about as of now. And I think what can be done is that we need to have a collective discussion which is not just within people of the social sector. It's like a silo that your NGO people are talking to each other. We need to involve people who are not from the social sector for a change.
Totally agree with that point.
Yeah, and filmmakers, it's very difficult for them because in South Indian cinema, the ladies who have the film actresses who have formed a collective of their own to fight sexual harassment, they are being now sidelined as women's issues. So every time you talk about it, it becomes a women's issue. So how do you ensure that you still bring this into mainstream and stay relevant instead of being seen as too activisty, like how Tapsi Pannu is now being seen, that she's too much of an activist. It's something like in the 70s, actresses who would get married would be dropped out of cinema because nobody wanted to fantasize about a married actress. So we need to have a collective discussion with all stakeholders involved and not just within ourselves. That's according to me the first step that we should look forward to.
Totally agree with you, Sonam, on that. And that's exactly why, because media is something that can have a ripple effect way sooner than individuals. So that's exactly.
Sorry, I'm going to butt in and also say that, we have a counterculture and we do speak on the internet, and we had AIB and Cause I Have Vagina Ray and all of these very cool things. And we of course have Youth Ki Awaaz and Waterfly calling out things like this. But how far is the reach? I mean, truth be told, the visual of Akshay Kumar sitting on a tree stalking a woman he loves in toilet is going to reach and teach far more people than, all of our collective efforts. So, this tends to be a vicious cycle because art imitates life and life imitates art, but we've got to break out of it at some point.
Which I wanted to talk about, which is why I feel like a movie like Thappad made a very important point, because to me, it was just one slap, which she reiterates. Everybody else talks about it and says it's just one slap. But, when we say the women talking about the women, we're also telling mothers, sisters, that it's okay, it was just a slap. Do you want to break up your family over it? Do you want to sort of not have any financial backing? Which is also, all of these things that we tell our women as women is also a problem. Saying ki, sahen kar lo and you are a stronger woman for it. Be sacrificial, you're a stronger woman for it, is a horrible thing to say to women, to say to anybody. You're just stop killing yourself trying to please everybody else because because of your gender, irrespective of what you're what you're taught to do. And if we don't start breaking the chains right now, then like I read somewhere that we didn't reach this level of conversation without lots of women before us having this conversation for us. So I think just like that, if we start breaking the chains now is when we move forward, and women maybe couple of decades down the line will have something will not be fighting the same battles that we're fighting right now.
You're very optimistic. I love it.
We
Yeah,
all
we
are,
definitely
honestly.
live in a country, you know, where Bollywood and cricket are treated more than a religion. So I feel, you know, Bollywood directors and storytellers have to be a little more careful when they show something like a domestic violence, because that's what we are, you know, people are seeing. And as Kabir saying, as and when it came out, because I have seen people laughing in the theater at the scene where he slaps his maid and he runs towards a maid. I've seen people laughing at that scene whereas I was fuming. So Bollywood does influence a lot of people because it is treated more than a religion to us.
That's true. And it is just so evident that how all of us are so fumed against Kabir Singh. I'm
Yeah,
loving it.
God,
It's
it's
like we
awful.
have so much, even after so many months of releasing that movie. Yeah, it's still there. It's good.
It was the pinnacle of shit. It just reached the next different level, I think.
Yeah. Also,
So,
that brings me again to the media role to curb, you know, when these kind of things pop up again and again. So, as we already know, most of us have been in journalism for a long time. We never had a gender beat. Recently, we have had Quint has a gender beat.
there is, yeah.
There are some organized. Wire has a gender beat. So
Mhm.
you know this is the beat that is emerging, and rightly so, and high time. Uh, so how, and otherwise it would have been a very standard crime, municipality, you know, those kind of beats in journalism that reporters cover. But now there is a specific gender reporter. So how, I want to discuss about what is the potential this beat has to, you know, in media to curb any violence against women. Like, you know, what should be their focus areas? Should it be actively calling out these kind of incidents, or it should be reporting like, you know, other stories are also reported, like once it is done you report, that's it. You know, about how journalism goes in a standard way. But should the gender beat be more empowered to tackle these issues?
I mean, are you conflating journalism with activism, which tends to be, which we tend to, we do right now, a lot of us do anyway. But my problem with the gender beat, and I love it, trust me, I'm for it. And my only problem is that these things cannot be, you know, put on the sideline as women's issues. Which tended to happen earlier in you know, magazines. There was everything, and then there was women, which was a little supplement on the side that told you what to not wear after you were 30. So I mean, I really think that the gender beat is really important. I think it plays a role to educate. Because also I think the one thing that I did see on the ground is that there is no common ground. And this is, I went undercover with 9 men who have raped across the country. And I realized that the genders don't understand each other at all. They come to each other with prescribed roles, and you either fulfill those roles or you don't. And there's a lot of tension at the moment as women are getting more empowered. So we do know, and all studies and all experts agree that gender violence is going to increase. You know, peace is a sign of absolute, of a status quo in society, and we're not in a period of status quo. We're in a period of change and flux. Women are getting empowered. Men are not taught to deal with these empowered women. And what you do then, misogyny is the law enforcement arm of patriarchy. So if she's, you know, stepping out of the bounds that she was expected to have, you know, worked within, you're going to hit her. Or if she doesn't do what, okay, I had a friend who's a very highly educated professional, and she goes abroad and she marries this Indian guy, and then he doesn't want her to go for meetings. She was better educated than him. She came back, she left the marriage in 10 months, and she came back and she's like, baby, he expected me to make him tiffin every morning. Like, come on, we're both going to work. So I think the genders don't know what's going on, and violence is one of the ways to address this. So the education across genders is really important. And I think the gender beat plays a huge role in that. And therefore, one of the consequences of that will also be reducing gender violence while explaining it and exploring it.
Punita, I'd also like to add in here
I was just gonna ask, because I know for a fact that YK has a proper gender section, just like other organizations. So yeah, I mean, how it has helped, and if you were before it was there, how it has seen the transition, if you could just highlight that.
So we actually have a resource center on this. As Tara was talking about how the beat tends to become sidelined and tends to be seen as a soft subject. Obviously, we wanted to change that perspective, and also not just what is being reported, but how it's being reported. So I see there's a question from one of the viewers, Dr. Sharfaroz, who talks about headlines always being in passive voice. The example that they give is this woman was raped, as opposed to he raped someone. And it's very very interesting that this seems to be a trend, and the excuse usually given is that, well, this was alleged, nobody actually saw it happen, but we know for a fact that a woman was raped, and there doesn't seem to be any further investigation about how these pieces are being produced. But we built a resource center after many, many months of everyone in YK talking about how we want to report on gender and sexuality and violence. And what we came up with was a set of guidelines. We worked with a few other organizations like Nazaria, which is a queer feminist resource group in Delhi, just to sort of put down something that any editor or any writer from any other publication could refer to. And it was a small effort from our part, but we did send it out to people, and I like to think that a lot of people used the guideline. But I do want to share something that it sort of upset me a little bit about how seriously people take these things. I did a workshop with a senior journalist called Georgina Maddox, and in partnership with Nazaria, which was about how to write about violence against women and domestic violence. And of the people over there, and there weren't more than 5 or 6 people, of the people there, most of them were online platforms, and one of them was from a vernacular newspaper in the South. And you don't see your big legacy media organizations coming to a session like this. It just is not being taken seriously. And for us to make any sort of lasting change, the way we talk about these issues is super, super important. So that was my 2 bits that I want to add.
Definitely. I would also like to know, I think, more about what was it before there was a gender beat, and after. Were there any change in the attitude itself? Because I believe personally that the source needs to be enlightened and empowered if they want to, spread out the right information to the full extent. So has there been any changes before and after this beat? And Hortifly, please step in for this as well, because I know for a fact that you guys have been releasing amazing content which is women centric, and just not about their rights, about the about lifestyle as well. So yeah.
First of all, Punita, thank you so much. It's just so nice to hear that. And to answer your question, it was an uphill journey, because we'd always had a gender beat, a gender section, but the way in which we started approaching it became very, very different, because we had also started reading up about intersectionality as a doctrine by Kimberly Crenshaw, and trying to apply that to the way we wrote about women's issues, not as a monolith, but also how it intersects with caste, with class, with disability, with orientation, any number of things. And that was, that was a turning point for us in how we were creating our guidelines and our structures. And I mean, I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, but as an open publishing platform, we crowdsource stories from people. And that requires interventions from our editors. We work with people to make sure that their writing is extremely solid and well informed before it goes out into the public. So our editors were also making that intervention once we realized that, okay, we've updated our resources, we've updated our approach to gender-based violence and gender as a concept on the whole. And our responsibility then lies with working with the user to create a more, responsible piece of work. So we will correct things that need to be corrected. We will have as long a conversation as is needed with the user, saying, this is why we don't use a particular word, or how about you use this word instead? This is archaic. And people have been so receptive. So, it started small in our conference room and is now something that we share with our entire user base. And it's something that goes out to 4 million readers who come to YK. And through our writing, we're also trying to change these perceptions. So it's been a huge change. The seeds were already there. We were just trying to, grow it into like this awesome tree. So yeah.
That's the power of ripple effect and media. What's better than media to do that? We are going to take questions that we have from the audience. I just have one question left before that, and even before that question, if anyone from Hortifly can step in and speak about how it is important to have women-centric or not important to have women-centric websites, and what were their challenges to take that forward.
Okay, so for us, we are women centric, and I mean, we literally just talk about women all day long. I feel like there's two major challenges that we face. One is that it's dismissive, like Tara and Shambhavis have said. A lot of people are very dismissive that this is a women's platform, therefore it won't have any content to serve us, and they get extremely uncomfortable that we produce content that challenges everything they believe or hold close to their heart. And we'll often find saying, so one is that we definitely want to be constantly talking about it, and secondly is we don't want to get the conversation to get hijacked. I feel like that happens very often. Like in the Me Too conversation, there was not all men, and our entire conversation is to keep it at Me Too. Keep talking about this, because we can wait for not all men. You guys have had your time. You've had a long time to talk about your issues. We're just coming forward. We're just starting to talk about, the problems that women are facing, and we're starting to challenge everything. So if it makes you uncomfortable, don't come here. They try to do this on our platform. They try to do it on our social media, where they're like, okay, but did you talk about this where this man was raped? I'm like, listen, I get it. I get that it makes you so uncomfortable that I'm talking about a woman who just stood up for herself and she said, I'm not taking your shit. We keep going back and constantly having to, it's like you walk 2 steps in the front, someone pushes you back, and then you keep sort of plowing forward and going, yes, okay, yes, we get it, but we're still going to talk about this. So one of the other things is we find that a lot of people come to us and want to tell their stories, but are not willing to be open about it, not wanting to say it as themselves, like be anonymous or be quiet about it, because they really know that what's happening with them is wrong, but they're not able to sort of stand up. And we get that, because you're not always going to be able to sit at home with no, access to any other finance or another home, or to go back to your family and be able to talk about these issues and just say, what, it's something that I can, sort of claim that a lot of us can be comfortable with, because we're all making our own money, but a lot of people can't. So we have to take that into account, and we have to stop being dismissed as just having a PMSE rant sometimes. because they do that to us as well. If you go on about like men and, you know, some of the tactics and the things they pull off, a lot of them are like, oh my God, you guys just feminazis, or and my God, that word gets thrown around like, oh my God, like it's, and you're like, what? I mean, it's not. They love using that against us because I think it's supposed to be derogatory. I mean, we don't care. We're feminists, we know that. But yeah, it makes everybody very uncomfortable when we talk about women constantly, because why are you not talking about us? We're a women's website.
I'm sure I can only imagine about the challenges that a women-centric website would face. But thank you so much for those inputs. It also makes us, better campaigners, because we know, we get the perspective what are the challenges media also faces. We just do not expect outrightly that, media should be doing this, media should be doing that. Everyone has a capacity, and it's very important to understand that if you want to work collectively. So thank you so much for those inputs. I think so. My questions are similar to what our audiences have. So, Suman, can we take a question now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question was from Madhuri. They've asked, there's an inevitable gap between the reach of a movie like Kabir Singh and a movie Thappad. How do you think this can be changed?
I think the answer comes back to the palate of the audience, right? So it's a slow process where people want to watch empowered women, so we start giving them empowered women. It's a slow process where it's one step after the other. Because right now, as I said, we're in a vicious cycle where this is the content we're creating and this is the content that sells, because these are the kind of men that we want to make heroes of. Kabir Singh, we're discussing Kabir Singh, of course. Clearly it's got all of us really riled up still 6 months after it was launched. But I think slowly but surely there are women, as women grow economically and are able to purchase those movie tickets and then go watch Thappad and say, I identified with Thappad. These are slow steps, and they're happening. But my point is, it's not this, if you call Thappad an alt movie or a counterculture, it's not fast enough. And I think we need to target culture from Bollywood, but from top down and from bottom up, right? If you want to see your daughters empowered and they're going to school and marry, and you want to marry an empowered woman, at some point you will be, there will be a group of people who prefer to watch a Thappad over a Kabir Singh. And I think, to me, another way to show feminist solidarity is, put your vote where your mouth is, put your money where your mouth is. So don't pay for Kabir Singh, don't pay for those tickets, and slowly, maybe people will realize that that's not the only thing that's commercially viable.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I could have answered or added anything more than Tara. So,
Kabir Singh gets my goat. I can talk about it for hours. Maybe we should just do a Kabir Singh thing.
Oh, God. This is like totally. I can't believe Kabir Singh is hijacking this webinar also. Now I'm not feeling right about it.
It might have to do a little bit with the commercials as well. Is a standard thing when you talk about pay parity, or just having more money, more budget means that you can have more screens. That means you can have more. And if you put song and dance, and people are gonna go watch Salman Khan movies. You can't do it. Apparently, escapism is the reason people watch cinema, and they don't seem to want to watch, reality. And even if your reality is completely messed up, and you will show them a Kabir Singh with songs and people kissing, it works better than a Thappad. And again, like Tara has highlighted, it becomes a women's movie. you will see these movies and you will think this is content that everyone should consume, but it's somehow something that is women's cinema. Why does it take a lipstick under my burqa, which talks about women's sexuality, so much struggle to be released when you can talk about a movie like Pyar Ka Panchnama, which is just about horny men, gets a release immediately and has a 2-minute dialogue, completely horrifying 2-minute dialogue, which is meme material. Why is that a thing? I think it's the commercial side of it where people just like, you know, we don't want to watch women.
So the palette needs to change, and women, this is I think that's it. You know, we need to change the palette. But anyway, I think we're done with this.
Sarah, I think the palette is changing slowly. It's very slowly, not at the speed as we would like prefer to see it, but it is changing. Kabir Singh was marketed as an unusual love story. Thappad from the very beginning has been marketed as a women's centric issue, and of course, as you said, that it's escapism. Nobody wants to see an art movie when, you know, they just want to get out from all the traffic and all the full week worth of work and boss shouting at you. You want to relax, calm down, so you would just go to some movie which has a good song and dance routine, item songs and everything. And it's again, it's the same vicious cycle. Are we like this because the movies are like this, or are the movies like this because we are like this? But it is changing slowly. For example, no means no, something that we have been shouting from the rooftops, and we have made ourselves hoarse by saying that. But it took a man, Amitabh Bachchan, the big B, to say that on cinema before it was finally accepted. Again, a man takes the cake over there, where something that we have been saying for ages, nobody notices. But when a man says like, ooh, nice, like very powerful, very powerful. But okay, fine. At least like one step at a time, I guess we can be happy with it, I guess. That at least someone is talking about it.
I want to cling on to what Sonam has just pointed out, because and also what Tara said about the palette changing, you know, because as annoying as it is to see men at the forefront of these feminist films, it is showing us that there's a different kind of demand happening. And I see it every day with the kind of stories that people submit to Youth Ki Awaaz. There are young people who are just ripping into pop culture and saying, I am not okay with this, I want something better. And they'll do it for everything. They'll do it for Padman, for Pink, you know, for Toilet, all kinds of stuff. And this is also, you know, it's also coming at the same time that these political discussions are happening. News reports are happening about anchors not doing a satisfactory job, you know, just seeing the headlines not being sensitive enough. Like, it's all coming in this, you know, we're getting it as a package nowadays. And I think that's really interesting. We're all seeing it, particularly on social media, you're seeing that shift happening.
Yeah. Should I get to the next question?
Yeah.
The next question, I think one of the questions is also around how entertainment and media can help. So I just have a connecting question to that, so that's why I'm going to pose it here. So, Lipstick Under My Burqa and Thappad, there was a commercial difference between both the films. Like, Thappad was more commercialized, and it wasn't like a movie ki family dekhne nahi jayega types. It was like a family movie as well. So do you think that media can also play with the content that is more reachable and more accessible to people who do not understand, like in a layman language? Also, consciously work on that, because getting too technical with the terms can again lay off a lot of people.
I don't know whether this answers your question, but I have a point about this. My problem with news coverage, and that's why I think what Mansi said was really relevant about how we have to keep these stories going. Because the problem with news coverage is that it's really episodic, right? The minute there's something, the minute there's a particular heinous rape or murder or something or acid attack, it's in the news and then it's gone. Now, this is problematic because when you said technical terms, what I noticed when I was undercover is that people don't know what rape is. Because a lot of people don't know what rape is, because if rape is the dramatic, rape and murder, the Delhi gang rape kind of, if that is rape, then it is certainly not, one thappad here, a little chheda chhadi there. So I think that keeping, when you say you don't want to get too technical with the terms, I think it's very important that mainstream commercial cinema and entertainment and websites talk about the nuance, because news is not giving you nuance in that sense. Opinion is, and how do you take opinion and put it into a palatable form is something that I think is important. Because not everyone is reading The Wire or Youth Ki Awaaz, and I think video plays a big role in this, but regional languages need to kick in as well.
Regional languages. I think that brings us to one of the questions.
Yeah, I think when we say it's technical, we might be undermining the audience's intelligence a little bit. We do have, when we give them nuance, when we give them, when we tell them that this is, when the right and wrong is gray, they understand it. It's not like they don't. It's just when it comes to commercial cinema, I think it's more convenient and easier to just sort of hide under the, hey, that this doesn't work. They get it. I'm sure they get it. Are they willing to accept that this might be a problem with the system? No. But do they not get it? I have a feeling that that's a gray area. They might know it's incorrect. They might know it's wrong. If years of social conditioning again have told you that having sex before marriage is wrong, it's a physical need. So if you're going to go out there and reclaim your sex life, it is not wrong, but you've been taught it's wrong. When you do it, if you do it despite your parents' apprehensions and everything, do you still think it's wrong? Is the question that where you watched this, you've been told it's wrong, but when you do it, do you really think it's wrong? Is the question then, because you know it's not.
Yeah, thanks, Mansi. That makes sense.
If I can go on a slightly different tangent about these things that Tara, you and Mansi, you have said. We are still plagued by this thing, the perfect victim narrative. We all have an idea of what a true victim should look like, should sound like, should behave like. And anyone who does not fit into that criteria, we don't consider them as a victim. We definitely use a lot of jargons internally within our own sector. And as you said, Mansi, I mean, the audiences are not stupid. They do understand these things, but they don't relate to it because for them, that person is not a victim. If you take the example of Lipstick Under My Burqa, the character played by Konkona, she was raped by her husband, but nobody would accept that as a rape. There were reports of how people were giggling in movie theaters when that scene was happening, when she said that, stop it, it's burning. And there were people giggling in movie theaters. They don't understand this thing. We have this narrative where some bad man is going to pounce out of the bushes and then drag you away and then rape you. That's not true. I mean, yeah, that does happen, but that's not true. Most of the rape victims are raped by the people who are known to them. And the words that we use also hold so much value. I still don't know. I mean, I'm undecided about it, but is there any other way we can describe this phenomena of sex before marriage or premarital sex? Both the terms denote that sex is supposed to be only after marriage, and something something other than that is out of the blue, or something out of the norm. It's words hold a lot of value. I think it was John Berger in Ways of Seeing. There's this entire debate about how the passive language in which rape news items are addressed, where a 23-year-old or a 21-year-old medical student was raped on a bus. Instead of saying that, we are not saying that 6 men raped a woman. We are using a passive language, and there is this entire beautiful discussion happening in some corner of the internet where women are objectified even in the language structure, because the sentence and the object, it's not how we should actually use it. We put it back on the women, where women are passive recipients and not. It's a lot of discussion, but then again, it's about nuance. How do we even actually make it palatable for people like my uncle, who has nothing to do with social sector, who just gets up, has breakfast, has a 1.5 hour bus journey to work in Bombay, and does boring work, like really boring work, and then comes back 1.5 hours and just watches TV and eats dinner and goes to sleep. How do we get that nuance to someone like my uncle? I have no idea. I'm still struggling to answer that, despite being an activist for over a decade. I don't know.
I just want to very briefly jump in here and make one point about how we address this in the language that we use. You know what, I feel like the devil is in the details here, really. And I'm saying this because I had the chance to listen to Eve Ensler speak in Delhi, because, I mean, she was here to promote a book of hers. And she said that when we talk about rape, we just tend to minimize the violence of it. You know, we reduce it to like that one line, which more often than not is passive, instead of going through the details. And that just makes it, you know, we have this very sanitized view of what domestic violence looks like, what sexual violence looks like. And Ensler made a point that unless we start talking about just how bad it is, every single step of that process, it's not going to hit home for people. We're just going to look at it as a news report.
I don't know. It also becomes really voyeuristic. So,
it can, and it's triggering as well.
I'm concerned about going that route. I mean, it's a balance, but we can, I think we, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I get that.
I mean, of course, we have to use trigger warnings for things like this. It's not something everyone can stomach, you know, it's not something that everyone should have to deal with. But I think it, you know, keeping this in mind is also an interesting thing to do.
Yeah, definitely it is. Wow,
I would just want to jump in. There's a question from someone who says that rape scenes are very sexual in that sense. I believe a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're never taught to talk about it. Female pleasure, and we address this constantly on How to Fly. Female pleasure is as important or as a man's pleasure, and if we're not going to see sex as something that happens between equal partners, then it's going to be the man turns around and goes to sleep, or like Sonam mentioned, it's just something that you laugh at because you never understand what the woman is going through. If you're not going to have this conversation with your husband, your partner, whoever it is that you're with, about how sex feels for a woman, and that it is an integral part of the domestic life, that is an emotional connection and a physical connection, a mental connection, then you're ignoring a very big part of it. And because that conversation never happens, that's why sex in any form is exciting. Even if it doesn't involve the woman's consent, it's just fine with us because we're like, hey, we get to see a sex scene. I think that's awful. And I think, web series like She and all of those that sort of harp on the feminist bandwagon and are a horrible representation of it, are doing more disservice to this cause than anything else. It's a very bad way to show this.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, talking about this on media channels, that's where people actually get validation also that, yes, what we were thinking at that time was correct because, this is so and so article, so and so video said that. That's where media comes in.
Well,
Media also has yeah, sorry, go ahead.
so I
Was
would
someone
like to
talking?
say, yeah. So earlier, because people were conditioned in a way that sex wasn't talking about, openly. That's why, sex in any form was like a pleasure to people. That's why rape, people used to consume the rape scenes more from the movies. Now, as the time is changing, women are coming out talking about sex. Women are coming out talking about female pleasure, like we also did on Butterfly. We did receive a lot of hate, on the comment section on our page, but we did speak about it and we continue to highlight such issues. However, the times are changing now, slowly and gradually people are opening up through content like sex education, and it is changing. People are getting to know what rape is. People are getting to know the difference between a rape culture and sex. So there is a shift.
There is a shift, and thanks to the content that is out there, I think that is what is making all the difference, I feel. Also, how do we? So Divya has a question from the chat. What about the women who do not have access to these websites? And here I want to speak about the role of vernacular media, regional languages and stuff, and how it can help and how crucial it is because obviously India has a considerable rural population, um, and internet accessibility for women is even lower. So how do we address that issue?
I'd like to take that if that's okay. The reason I'm not as optimistic as my fellow panelists is because, I grew up on I grew up on this diet, right, of English and feminism and all of these things. And so rural India, when I was undercover, was a huge revelation. It also horrified me. And that's the reason I've just been quiet about all the optimistic numbers and the way people are. I mean, and I'm really happy that in a certain section things are improving. But what I saw in villages in UP and in MP was that the men had internet access, which essentially meant they had access to porn and rape videos, and the women didn't. When they watched TV, it was always, and if there was a TV in the house, it was always the man who controlled the remote control. So they watched Gadar, for instance, a very famous, very popular movie for some reason. They watched a lot of films like that. And then women, if they had an opportunity, watched TV shows, but rarely. But again, neither are the men getting access to the kind of content that we are talking about here. Further removed were the women. So vernacular press or vernacular languages, like we saw this, I don't know whether you watched it, there was a recent video on TikTok that showed a woman getting raped or asked. It was a funny little video that went viral, funny in quotes, of course. But to me, if that's what's going on in rural spaces, which is where a majority of India lives, it's really, I think our little feminist internet in this conversation doesn't reach there. And that to me is a problem. And I don't really know how to reach these women or even these men as the people who first access content, and men are literate first in a household. How are we reaching these men and women? And I really think, unfortunately, the only answer is NGOs, because government schools don't do it. They barely teach, your maths, let alone any sort of sexuality education. And the only answers on the ground and through NGOs, women and male-centric NGOs. Unfortunately, the media, the way we see it, or this kind of media, this nuanced, non-mass, feminist media, is going to take a while to get through. And that's the absolute truth of how things really are on the ground.
That is exactly the question that, what can media do to, just contain that path to reach to the rural sector? Is there any way that, any strategy that...
How do we get there? Through what media? Is it a TV? But who accesses that TV? Is it a phone? Women don't have as much access to a phone and is it literacy? So there are so many layers of disempowerment that you're talking about. Of course, we need a whole overhaul in vernacular media, and that's very well, but I really think for a certain segment, for the most disempowered of women, media is not the answer. Because even media is a privilege. Even access to the media is a privilege at some level. That's that's the uncomfortable truth here.
Sonam has something to say.
Using the current context of COVID, I do want to say that there are a lot of reports that are coming out, which of course only people within the social sector read. Nobody else really cares about reading reports. So it's about gender mainstreaming responses or gender mainstreaming, COVID responses, health responses, emergency responses, disaster management, whatever. One of the key things that was recommended was that the ASHA workers who go door to door to collect health information, they should have been trained to identify domestic violence victims, like how airlines train the air hostesses and the pilots to identify if someone's a victim of trafficking, to look for the obvious signs. We could have easily trained ASHA workers. The number of annoying COVID messages that happen on our phone every time we had to make a call, and for some reason they realized that everyone's pressing one, so they stopped doing that. So we actually had to end up listening to the entire thing. They could have added, the government rather, could have added domestic violence bit on it as well. We could have had ads coming out on it, because the most scary thing was reading that news report which said that the helpline, it stopped ringing the day the lockdown started. The helpline stopped ringing. Otherwise, these helplines, they, like, if you see a government office, there's always a phone ringing somewhere and nobody cares about it because it's like white noise to you. And the phones, they stopped ringing in the lockdown. How do we ensure that? Because even when you don't have access to phones or internet, you have your own social circle, tiny social circle. Women have always had this ability to form networks. And how do we tap into that? It's not just the effort of the government, it's also the effort of the media. It's also the effort of non-government organizations. And when it comes to print media, we have to also, I don't know, it sounds very NGO-ish for me to say this thing, but we need to have trainings for editors and journalists who are reporting on this thing. They are absolutely unaware of things. A personal incident that happened with me, few months back, I wrote an article on domestic violence on 498A and the number of false cases. Is it really that problematic? Are there really so many false cases? And I submitted my first draft to the sub-editor, and he called me up and he says, Sonam, yeah, it's looking too one-sided. I'm like, how can there be two sides to domestic violence? I'm not really sure. I asked him the same question. And he's like, I don't know, but can you just like look into it? It's looking very one-sided. I was really confused. I don't know, how can there be two sides to domestic violence? How am I going to sit down and educate this man on how to play a role of an editor for a domestic violence piece? Gender beat, yes, it'll do good, but it all comes down to what is considered gender or a gender story. Something that affects almost half, really half of the population of this country, rape. Is this a gender thing or is it an overall population thing? Because I think Kamala Basan had said this thing in one of her videos, that men use their bodies as a weapon when it comes to rape. So they're actually dehumanizing themselves because they're using their bodies as a weapon. So it's not just a women's issue, but why does it get categorized into a women's issue? Journalist Namita Bhandare, she also said this thing. She used to write a gender-related section in Mint for quite some time. Probably one of the earliest ones in India before this entire gender beat got famous. She said that as a reporter, we are taught that you have to be objective, but there are some things that you just cannot be objective to, like domestic violence. How can you be objective to that? Bell Bajao campaign.
Yeah.
That campaign was so amazing. I practiced that in real life, and I still do. I know it works wonders, and you have that fear in your heart. Your heart is pounding, and no matter how many times you have done this, every time you stand outside and you're about to ring the doorbell, it's still scary AF, and it still works. Why couldn't we do a replay of Bell Bajao campaigns during COVID time when everyone is literally sitting at home and watching TV? Political will, many questions, many answers, and I think media organizations are constantly trying to address these things for way longer time than I've been alive, I guess.
That's true.
I think we, like Sonam said, women form a lot of networks. Unfortunately, in these networks, are these women even willing to talk about this? One of the examples that comes to mind is FGM. It is a huge practice in the Bora community, and it is women who do this. Women who take their daughters, who take them to a woman who will cut her. And I don't understand. I understand that there's a network, and these women, I'm sure there's conversation about how horrifying this practice is, right? And it's violence against a woman. It's against a concept because it's done to girls. It's not even women. It's girls. And when that network is still being formed, a lot of women are so systematically abused, not just physically but mentally, that it starts becoming in their own head. It's their own fault. So when you speak to domestic violence victims, not only do they justify their abuser's act, they also tend to go back to him. A couple of times after they're even spoken to, counseled and all of that, they just go back to him because they don't know how to fully comprehend this new life. They've been so systematically torn down every single day, not just physically, but like with their confidence, with their, every single thing is worked upon. They cut off from family. All of these things play such a huge role that despite having a network, a lot of women might not even speak up because that's just who they're taught now. Now they think that's their reality and there's nothing they can do to change it.
Yeah. It's a different way of seeing, I think. And it's hard for people to adopt it immediately. But you do what we do what we've got to do, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly why, again, like that brings me again to the question. Again, we have a question on the vernacular media. I think we have a lot of fans here about, how it can help. And like Tara mentioned that, it's not the solution, not the ultimate solution. And I think we believe that, but what about people actually reaching there? in the language that they understand? Will it help women get better access to internet, or at least give them the motivation of, yeah, if YK and Hotfly can comment on that. And I think, yeah, that was the last question that we had. And that will also, we will also continue this session into the closing act. So, yeah, over to you guys.
I'm sorry, I'm that person. I forgot the question. What is sorry?
The question is the same about the vernacular media. I just wanted your opinion. Like, we have Tara's opinion on how it's not the ultimate solution, which we agree. I mean, that's the uncomfortable truth, like she put it. But yeah, that is. But having a language like a Hindi language or a Marwadi, website, will it be a motivation for the women to, internet लगाने के लिए उनका कोई will it be a motivation for women to get out of their comfort zones, which they would have never thought about, to just read that news, and when it is in Hindi or it is in a language that they do not understand anyway, why will they even go ahead and talk about it? Why will they put up a fight when they have so many things to fight about? So yeah, in that sense, what can media do to reach regional languages?
If I could take this, sorry. This is a very interesting question because it's an extremely challenging ask, I think. Like, even if you were to have resources available in different languages, it is possible that it will fall on deaf ears. And I apologize for using ableism here, but how do you convert men who have the finances, who have the political power, the social power, into being allies to women? No matter how many articles you create in how many languages, it's going to take a lot more, I think, personal interaction for there to be any change. And I think Palak is also aware of our limitations as Butterfly and YK too, because there is such low internet penetration that perhaps, platforms like us will not be able to affect that change. But some of the things that we can do is, for example, Youth Ki Awaaz now runs something called an Action Network Fellowship. And our fellows are able to go into communities in their spaces and start taking action, which is something that hasn't happened before. And they're doing a sort of mix between online and offline. They design a digital advocacy campaign and then they take it offline. But yeah, I mean, going on ground is always going to be an issue for the media. So yeah, Palak's take on this also would be really interesting. Yeah.
As content creators, we do have limitations from our company, but if we are given the resources of having, um, a content creator in every city possible, which is difficult, in every state with who knows vernacular languages like a Bengali, what we can do is we can, go to Bengal and create content in Bengali so that it reaches the people over there. Similarly in different states, but yeah, we do come with our own limitations for that as well, so it's a little difficult, but it's not impossible.
I think one of the concerns will also be, are these women making the conscious choice to actually access this media? I think at this point, what I see most effective is WhatsApp, and people forwarding that, videos, forwards, messages, phones, whatever it is, forwarding that and using that as a conversation touch point. Vernacular or not, if they're conversation, if they're the ones, if like Tara said, if they're the ones not making the call, whether they get internet even on their phone and their husband's doing it for them, then it's going to take a very, very long time before they access news as an active audience. Passively, they may get served it, by something else, somewhere else, some other source. But them actively looking for information like this is very, I do believe it will be very, very difficult, even for vernacular. Even if you speak my language, if I'm not relating to you, it might be really difficult to get to them.
That is a challenge, and I hope in the coming time and coming years we are able to teach that. And just acknowledging it as a challenge, I think it's a start. Again, being too optimistic about it, but yeah, I would like to close this on an optimistic note. So that's why I'm saying that. And yeah, I mean, this discussion is not over yet. It's just the time constraint that we have to close this for now. But to give you just a brief on how we want to take it forward is we have a couple of questions, and we will have questions coming up on this issue for a while. And if the panel would allow, I would just forward them the questions, and if they can just see if they could just have their comments on that. We'll release it. We'll keep releasing it on social media, and we just want to continue this interaction post this webinar as well. And I'll definitely keep you posted on the next steps, which might also involve an active participation from your end. And I hope that we will be able to see that participation again.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. This is very interesting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Punita.
Thank you so much for being here, guys. It was a very good discussion. Honestly, I was thinking, okay, what will we talk about beyond 15 minutes? But then Kabir Singh stepped in. So, no, jokes apart, I think vernacular media is something that I really would want to take this conversation forward. And you might see, this is for the audience as well, you might see more posts on that and how we can take that forward. We would be in touch with YK and Hortifly again for media campaigning kind of opportunities. And thank you so much, guys. It was a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chatka.
Bye.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, Sonam.
Before everyone leaves, I would also just quickly like to thank everyone who were engaging both here and on Facebook through their questions and their comments. Usha, Chaitra, Vivek, Madhuri, Dr. Shatros, Divya, and everyone else. Just thank you so much. We have noted your questions, and if it hasn't been answered here, we'll be putting up a blog, and we'll be following up on your questions.
Thank you for watching our webinar. Please like, subscribe, or share our YouTube channel.